Hey, welcome back to the channel, and in this video we're going to continue on with the 1990 ZXR750 restoration, see how far we can get this thing torn down, so stay tuned. So like I said, we're going to pick up where we left off in the teardown of this bike. There's a really, I mean, it looks like there's a long way to go, but there really isn't. I think the trickiest, and not even tricky, the more time-consuming stuff is really just disconnecting and labeling all of the electrical connections. Once the wiring harness is out, it should be fairly straightforward. Basically pull the wheels off and swing arm and the forks and whatnot, and then then we're into unbolting the frame and lifting all of that off the engine. So the other thing that I've typically done in situations like this is, while the bike is still on its wheels and it's a lot more stable to work on, I'll kind of crack loose all of the engine mounts, because it tends to be a little too precarious if you've got, once you take the wheels off and this thing is balancing on a center jack, you can't really be snapping bolts and nuts loose too easily. So engine mounts will get loosened off. The front sort of subframe here will get loosened off before I take the wheels off. The rear subframe will come off completely. So that's the plan. So let's get after it. All right, so I've hit my first snag. So this was not a standard Allen bolt here attaching the rear subframe. So I was going around loosening everything. Everything was coming loose fine. And this one, I put my Johnny bar on it just to give it a quick snap, get it loose. And it just stripped like it was made of chocolate or cheese. So then I managed to hammer the size 8 back in there. So I used a short on there, and it stripped again. So then I put this impact driver on it, and this is an extractor bit. I've got a whole set of these things in here. So I've heated it, I threw some heat at it, but it's not doing too much. So I think I'm gonna put my MAP gas torch on it and see if that helps. This little butane is not throwing out enough heat. There's just too much of a heat sink there with all that aluminum in that frame. It just sucks the heat right out of it. So I think I'll try the MAP gas and see what I can do there. But again, let's not be surprised. This is what happens. So that's I mean, that's completely foobarred. So if worst comes to worst, I will end up drilling that out. Well, the MAP gas did nothing to help my case here, so we're gonna have to drill that out, I'm afraid. There's always something, just the way it goes. So let me show you what I found on a bike I did a few years ago, where the same thing must have happened to somebody. And instead of drilling it out and using an extractor or whatever, they figured that the best thing to do was to they basically cut off the frame right here with the Sawzall. I kept this just to as a reminder of the crimes that people commit against these old bikes. So they cut it off, and I guess they got all the other bolts out okay. And then to put it back together, you see there's kind of holes drilled in here. So what they had was a couple of little metal brackets that you get off the hardware store, and a couple of carriage bolts through it, and they just bolted that thing back together. And yeah, I was on a ZXR750. So I ended up having to buy a whole new rear subframe for that bike. And I ended up just drilling out the bolt that was there, and it came out without too much grief. But yeah, that's what people do. So when I drilled out the frame bolt on that GSXR that I showed you the broken piece of, this was the bolt that was in there. That's kind of what I'm going to aim for again this time. This one worked out really well. I got it bang on. When you're drilling these things out, it's usually pretty easy to see that you're, too far over one way or the other. Not very easy to see if you're up or down too far, and it is important to get the hole kind of perpendicular, or parallel to the bolt. So you want the hole to come out the center of the bolt on the other side, which is easier said than done. So I have one of these little levels here, and so what I typically like to do is before I start drilling, I'll hold the level against the drill bit to get it as close as I can up and down, and then you just go by eye for side to side, left and right, and then I'll just start the drilling process. On an Allen bolt, because you kind of have that natural opening and countersinking in the middle of an Allen bolt, I've just used this one size up on the drill from the 1/4 inch, was that 5/16, to just to kind of get the pointed or the center of the drill started. I did use a center punch anyway, but this just kind of gives me that nice guide point. So now I'm going to swap this out. And the reason I want to go all the way through is twofold. And this is just my experience. This is not, anybody telling me that this is the right way or the wrong way to do it, but this is what I find. In a scenario like this where I can get access to the back side of this bolt, having the hole drilled all the way through does two things for me. It increases the chances that I can kind of collapse the threads a little bit and potentially loosen that bolt off easier if I can pull the bolt threads away from the threaded portion of the frame. And if it's hollow inside, I'm just all the way through, I have a better chance of collapsing the threads down just a bit and having it give way. The second thing is, because I'm likely to have to put a thread extractor or an easy out or whatever you want to call it in here, if through some very unfortunate circumstance I were to snap that easy out off inside there, you can't drill those out because they're hardened steel. So if I have an access hole from the back as well, in this case what I could actually do is, I could get to the point of removing the swing arm and the shock absorber from inside here, and I could use a punch, a steel punch to smack the stuck easy out back out this way, and then kind of go at it again. So whereas if I've just got a blind countersunk hole in there and I use an easy out, it's probably going to be stuck in there forever. So that's my logic. I'm just going to try to put the hole right through the center, keep drilling it out till I get to that 1/4 inch, and then see where I go from there. So there's my 5/16, just barely started in the head there. So now I'm going to move down to a 3/16 and then just slowly work my way. Okay, here's one other tip, and this is kind of going to be an obvious thing, but I've been guilty of not doing this more times than I care to mention. So you can just see I've got I think that's like 3/64 or something like that I've got going through there at the moment. But what I would say is, whatever drill bit you're using, make sure they're sharp. And so many of us have got sets of drill bits, me included, where the drill bits are either low quality or they're dull and old. And getting, doing a decent job and drilling through something like that with success, without it taking forever and a day, and without pushing too hard and snapping a drill bit, especially these smaller diameter ones. I mean, if you've got a nice sharp bit, the metal is going to start to come out like that. So one other quick tip here, I use WD-40 as kind of a cutting oil. You can buy, and I should probably have some purpose cutting oil, but in the absence of that, I find this stuff seems to work okay. So I just got the drill all the way through the bolt. So you're going to see for the first time, as well as I am, how close to the center of that bolt I got on the other side. There we go. That is not bad, eh? Not bad at all. So I came pretty darn close to getting in the center of that. The reason that gets to be a little tricky on some, maybe including this one, this bolt, kind of first glance, appears to go kind of perpendicular to, you know, where I am here sitting on the ramp, but in actual fact it's kind of slightly kinked one way, because this frame section is, again, it's not exactly 90 degrees to the center line of the bike, or parallel to the center line of the bike. Let me get my terminology straight. It's kind of slightly that way, very slightly that way. So I kind of had to start to compensate just a little bit when I was drilling. Instead of going kind of dead perpendicular, I kind of had to start to go just a little, I'm exaggerating, but a little bit like that to land dead center on the other side. I came close. Okay, so we're not quite there yet, but I thought it would be a good time for another thought from me on to-dos and not to-dos in this process as they occur to me. So one thing I would suggest, and again, just my own personal experience, is, you know, if I start off with this 3/30 seconds bit here, that one is what I started with, and I'm working my way up. I find if I go to the next size, it's not going to go well. If you pick a bit as the next size for the hole, it's too close to your previous size, it tends to catch, and it kind of wants to snap its way through, and it just feels to me like there's too much opportunity for that bit to kind of grab and snap. So the left-handed bits did turn out to be sharp enough to drill all the way through, but they did not do a job of pulling out the thread, so that thread is still stuck pretty fast in there. So I got a nice clean hole all the way through. You can see on the other side there, look at the you can see there's the hole through on the back side, so it's still nicely centered. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at my other set of bits here and see if I can safely go up one size from the 1/4 inch, because I'd like to see if I can, you know, collapse that thread in a little bit and see if it'll come out. That's 9/30 seconds. So I did try the extractor in there once already, and I'll be honest, it didn't feel good. So that's one of the things I find is, you know, these things, if you snap them off, it was going to be a brute of a job getting it out, as I said, which is why I want the hole all the way through. But you generally, I think you can feel, like if I put that in there, there's actually, I need the next size up, I guess, now, because I just drilled it out again. But you can generally feel, and you need to kind of get the feel of when this feels like it's starting to bend or twist, and the bolt isn't moving. You need to stop, because yeah, you don't need that snapping off in there. So I can probably go up to 5/16 in there and have maybe about 1 millimeter of thread left on each side, maybe a little less by the time the bit wanders around a little bit, but I cannot go any bigger than that through there, and so far it has not budged. Finally, there we go. It has finally given way. It's coming out. Went up one size on the extractor after I got that last hole drilled through, and it's come out. All right, it's out, and I'm quite happy. You could not get that much more centered than that for a hole all the way through. But yeah, I went up to the next size through, and that way I could get a slightly larger extractor in there. And then it really, once I got that one through and in, it didn't really take much at all. I had never had that feeling of the extractor starting to twist or anything. So yeah, happy. So I am going to double check the threads, of course, on this once I get it completely detached from the bike, because when this was coming out, it felt like it was kind of almost like this was bent. So I'm going to check the threads on this as well, just to make sure they actually are the right pitch. Because one of the things that you often find is, you know, somebody loses a bolt and then they go to their tool bin and they find, oh, that looks about the right size. And instead of being a metric thread of a certain pitch, they find some SAE/Imperial Allen bolt, and they just ugga-dugga that sucker right in there, and then it becomes a royal pain in the arse to pull them out. So all right, so the good news is they are the same size. So that's the thread diameter on both of them. So I just used my vernier calipers basically to measure each one. They were identical. And then they're supposed to be at 1.25 pitch. They're M10 1.25. So there's the thread gauge that I used. And hard to see here. Easy to see when you hold them up to the light. But they are both the same. So the pitch is good, the diameter is good. You know, one was obviously longer than the other, which is no big deal, but now I have actually two brand new ones of these. If I can get a hold of it, I have two new ones of these coming in the mail. Once you get to those larger diameter drills, it actually generates a significant amount of heat through the drilling process. You may have seen on that last drill pass that I did the smoke coming from the bolt, and that's just from friction. And even with tons of WD-40 getting squirted on there, it'll still generate a lot of heat, which if these things have been Loctited in, for instance, that will help to break the bond of the Loctite. So all right, so here's another top tip for disconnecting a starter motor cable. I've seen lots of videos and whatnot where people just basically put a wrench on this nut here, or a socket and ratchet on this, and then they just crank it on or crank it off. And my experience tells me that's not necessarily the best way to go. So what I like to do is, you see there's actually a nut down here as well. There's one underneath the connector and one above the connector. And this post inside the starter motor is connected to some wires. And what can happen if you just put a wrench on this one and you crank that off, that whole post can turn and you can end up tearing the wires off inside. So what's generally I find a better way to go is get yourself a kind of a skinny wrench. I don't even know where I got this, but I've had it for many years. And if you have to, you can take an old wrench and kind of grind it down thin enough, because these nuts in here tend to be quite a bit smaller. So, and then I put that one on there and I hold that one still, and then I put another wrench on this one, and then I can remove that nut without this moving, and that makes sure that that post doesn't get twisted and tear any wires off inside. All right, so we're getting close to pulling out the wiring harness. I didn't film, didn't video much of any of the process. I mean, it's just basically unclipping connectors and wires and labeling everything. Now you might say, well, why do you bother labeling anything? Because 90% of those plugs can only go into one other plug anyway. Which is true, but I just don't want to be second guessing anything along the way. So for the extra, half an hour that it might take me to label both sides of every connector that I pull apart, I just get peace of mind. And when you're kind of pedantic and detail oriented and analytical, or whatever you want to call it, like me, you just can't. I just can't bring myself to pull all this stuff apart without doing all of this. My OCD will not allow that to happen. So there's the bottom line. I can't help myself. Okay, just so you can see, you know, how I've organized some of this stuff, and this is just my OCD that makes me do this. One box, this is all the stuff that just needs to be cleaned. There's no restoration or refinishing. It's just, you know, dirty plastics and all that kind of stuff, tail light gauges, battery boxes, etc. Cleaning only. This is stuff that's been painted that shouldn't have been. So this is the stuff that needs to get kind of stripped and refinished in some way, shape, or form. So things like the top triple clamp, the paint needs to come off it, needs to be polished up. Chain guards, shin guards on the foot pegs, all that kind of stuff. And this is what I call the wet box. So any of the brake reservoirs, master cylinders, brake calipers, radiators, anything that's likely to have stuff dripping and oozing out of it is in this box. There's a pile of bodywork. This box is stuff that is painted. It's just needs to be kind of refinished. So most of this is kind of like just refinishing it in black. And then we've got stuff like cables and electrical. The carbs are in here for now as well. That's just general cleaning and refurb in there. Any kind of dedicated electrical parts, CDI boxes, fuse boxes, relays, whatnot. And then this is what all the this is all the fasteners so far. Everything sort of bag tagged and labeled. And yeah, that's the way I do it. All right, there we have it. The major part of the teardown is done. Got all the big bits are off. So now, in the next video, I'll start doing what I call the minor disassembly. So disassembling all the components that make up the swing arm and the linkages underneath, taking all the bracketry and whatnot off the main frame, taking all the rotors and whatnot off the wheels, brackets and whatnot have to come off that front cradle, etc., etc. So that's kind of the next phase. But for now, we're going to call this good. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and throw a comment down below. Tell me what you think so far, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.